educators usually have another educator that they can say, like, this teacher really inspired me or really believed in me.
Sure.
I didn't have that space.
This is High Tech High Unboxed. I'm Alec Patton. And today it's my great pleasure to introduce a guest episode from one of my favorite podcasts, the Educated Guest Podcast, produced by Cesar Fernandez, Rodrigo, Arancibia, and Ed Nunez. And just a heads up, like all Educated Guest episodes, this one contains some strong language. With that said, I'll let Cesar and Rodrigo explain what it's all about.
I mean, it's just a chance for us as educators to tell our stories. That's how it started, you know, a bunch of equipment in a garage and let's give it a shot. And slowly it's kind of just morphed into this, like, anyone who's a game changer in communities and schools, we want to capture their story and their insight.
Yeah, particularly like the people, the unsung folks, the people who aren't typically recognized. These are the basketball coaches, the expanded learning professionals, the community organizers, the activists. We want to hear those stories because those ones are the ones that typically make the biggest impact, but often go the least recognized.
Yeah. And I know that, like, Rodrigo, you were real incognito about who Cesar is last time we recorded this, but Cesar, I'll let you introduce yourself however you see fit.
I am a father, a husband, an educator of 22 years, most of it in a secondary district here in San Diego, and I'm a math teacher.
And Rodrigo, who are you?
Yeah, so Rodrigo Arancibia, I am the co-director for the Carpe College Access Network that's housed at the graduate school at High Tech High, but after school practitioner at heart and teacher and thoughtful listener. So trying to make it so it's all ambiguous so that people just don't necessarily pin me down all the time, you know?
What that means is Rodrigo hasn't seen the inside of a classroom for like a decade.
Exactly. Or it just means I've been looking at the classroom in a different way, friend.
Okay.
Piece of shit C's. I love it. Welcome to Come Strong.
Good morning, Unboxed.
Good morning, Unboxed.
All right. So on this episode, you guys had Adriana Lepe-Ramirez on, the principal of Escondido High School. Why'd you guys want to talk to her?
Go ahead and start that one off, Rodrigo.
Sure. Yeah. I thought, when we talked to Adriana, she's a part of the Carpe College Access Network as one of our network schools. And, she's been doing a lot of thoughtful work, and she has a history and a background in doing some of the college access work. But what we noticed, into listening to her story and learning her story, we noticed that it was a lot of the things that happen outside the classroom that were particularly impactful. So we wanted to highlight that story as one of our leaders who's making some significant changes in her sector, in her school, in her community. And so that was kind of the initial component. C's, was there anything else that you found particularly interesting in hearing her story?
Well, in hearing her story, yes. But I mean, Rodrigo and I run in so many different circles that sometimes he'll just bring somebody to the podcast and I'll just cold interview him, right? I won't have the time to research him. So he says, hey, we're going to interview this principal from up north. I look her up a little bit. I'm like, wow, Latina, great story. Principal of a big high school. And I'm like, hell yeah, let's do it. But the most amazing part is obviously hearing her story, her bio. There were times when I got emotional hearing her struggles as a single mom while trying to get her education. It brought back a lot for me and me growing up with my mother, and not always, but sometimes feeling like it was just us. Adriana brought all that back out in me. So to hear her story and then to hear what she's also doing as a principal, it was a powerful episode.
Here's Cesar and Rodrigo's interview with Dr. Adriana Lepe-Ramirez.
Let's get right to it.
It's fine. I'm here now.
Thank you, la reina del norte, Adriana Lepe-Ramirez. Can I first introduce you to like some of the guests that are on phone with you or on the Zoom call with you?
For sure.
Sweet. So I have Cesar Fernandez, the co-host and actually the host of the Educated Guest podcast. Cesar Fernandez is a district an employee of a district down here in the South County that shall remain nameless.
I'll give you a hint. District in distress.
Yikes!
That's a good hit.
Also on the phone, we have our executive producer, Katie Yording, also known as Miss K, on the phone joining us. This is going to be an experiment between the graduate school, our publication, Unboxed, and then the podcast that Cesar and I, mostly Cesar, has been running for the last 3 years now, the Educated Guest podcast. And so the way that we've run podcasts before, we're super informal. We just want to get to know people on a human level, hear the origin stories of amazing educators, and then just have honest conversations, because a lot of what we hear and a lot of what we see in education is patted down by this sanitization of the truth. And so we want to kind of get away from that and just have a real conversation. So I'm going to probably cuss. It's likely Cesar doesn't know any other words than fuck that. But tell me a little bit about where you grew up, where you're from, and what your educational experience was like growing up. What was that like for you?
All right. Well, I grew up in East LA. It's a little town called El Sereno. High poverty, a lot of large Latino population. Most of us were Mexican, or what we thought was Mexican. So like a Mexican Salvadorian, or
yeah.
because everybody's Mexican. I can't say that I had a great experience, and I think sometimes that's a big challenge, where educators usually have another educator that they can say, like, this teacher really inspired me or really believed in me.
Sure.
I didn't have that space. I saw that space live in my sister and my brother's journey, but it didn't necessarily live in mine. I'm the youngest of three, so my older brother and sister were super, like, uber smart and like captain of the football team, and I just wasn't ready to try that hard. So, I mean, to be honest,
real, just to be real, huh?
Yeah. So, especially going into, middle school and high school, the teachers would get really excited to hear that another Lepe was coming into their classroom.
Yeah.
And I had to make it real clear that they're not going to get that same Lepe experience with me.
I love it.
Was it the eyeliner that let him know?
It might have been. So, like most of my friends, we kind of jumped from one year to the next without any real guidance, without any real direction. And my senior year was probably the first time we spoke to a college and career tech or counselor. And the conversation was kind of like, well, what community college do you want to go to? And I said, well, what do you mean, what community college do I want to go to? I want to go to Cal State LA, because that was the local CSU in my community. And, she laughed at me, and she was like, no, I'm serious. What community college do you want to go to? Mm-hmm. And, I said, Rio Hondo. I just didn't realize that there were courses that I had to take, and there was pathways that I needed to be on in order for me to get to Cal State LA. I had decent grades. I had C's and better. But my friends and we just didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the majority of us ended up either at East LA College, and I went to Rio Hondo Community College.
And so this is a typical story that we hear with educators. They didn't really have that rich experience in their formative years, but there had to have been a moment where you kind of turned that corner, and it sounds like it was in community college, right? Maybe there was a professor that inspired you, or maybe it was just the experience of being with others in community college where you said, hey, I got to make this move and I got to get to that 4-year and do such and such. When was that moment for you?
Honestly, I think honestly, that moment came for me when I got pregnant with my son and realized I needed to figure out my life because I was having a baby.
How old are you?
I was 18 when I got pregnant.
Wow.
So, I wasn't the best student. So it wasn't like I left my high school just really prepared for much. I remember, walking into high school classes, and there was notes written on every chalkboard that lined every wall. And we spent, 50 minutes just copying the notes, and that was class.
Damn.
So when I got to school and I struggled and I didn't know some of the basic stuff that I probably should have known, I did have professors say, college isn't for everybody, Adriana. You just might want to rethink this.
Piece of shit.
Yeah.
God damn.
No, it was amazing. It was amazing. My self-esteem was great, really high at that point. I did fall in love with history. Like, I fell in love with the subject, and I fell in love with the way some of my teachers talked about it, which made it so just relatable and understandable. And it was the way they taught me history that made me fall in love with it, that led me to decide to major in, or at least get a minor in history and major in social science. But to say like somebody really like inspired me, I don't think I had that, my friend.
Dang.
Like I think it really was. I knew going into, I knew I wanted to work with at-risk kids. That was my jam. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with kids who represented my group of friends that didn't have the same opportunities that I had and ended up in jail, or ended up dropping out, or ended up just not making it.
Yeah.
And they didn't make it because they didn't have the supports that they needed in the spaces where they should have felt most safe. And so that's what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what that looked like. Like, I didn't know it was going to look like becoming a teacher and eventually moving into being an administrator. I just knew I wanted to work with that population.
Was there a particular moment where you're like, yo, I got to do this? Like, this is it for me? Because I know that we're gonna hop into your after school story, because that's super important to the podcast. It's super important to me and my origin story. But like, was there a particular moment in which you realized like this is the population I need to work with?
I think it's just always been there. Again, I probably, like, I lost my first friend to gang violence in middle school. We went to, like, I could look back at my first grade class pictures and see little Robert De Leon, who was super sweet and a friend who, didn't even make it to the 9th grade. And, the boys that I graduated, like 6th grade with, I can't even remember graduating high school with them. Like, I think they either moved away, or they went to jail, or they went to continuation schools. We were a small school. We were 2 classes, 2 6th grade classes. And I don't remember any of the boys from my 6th grade class graduating high school with me.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I knew that this was the space that I wanted to live in and work with that population, with the population that I grew up with.
How does after school come into your world?
So I got pregnant. I was 18. I needed to work. Well, I was pregnant and I was a single mom. So my son's dad left shortly after I got pregnant. So I had to work, and I started working as an instructional aide at an elementary school. And I think that was when I fell in love with teaching, is watching the teachers like spark that excitement for learning and the creativity that they were able to use in everything that they did, whether it was teaching reading or math. Everything was creative and engaging, and the kids were just so excited to learn. And I think that's what made me fall in love with the teaching aspect.
Sounds like you had a really good experience being in IA. So, I mean, the teachers you worked with obviously were amazing. I mean, I know that it was my experience as an IA that really turned me on to be an educator. So that honestly was the catalyst for you wanting to be in the classroom also?
Yeah, I think that was the biggest indicator that this is where I wanted to be, was watching how they literally changed kids.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yes.
100%. On this podcast, it makes sense. There are some places that it doesn't make sense.
That's what we want every adult on campus to be able to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, wait, so you're an instructional aide, and then how do, again, like, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get harping on the after school stuff, but I'm curious.
So, you know, I had a pretty amazing principal at that elementary school. I was working at Sierra Park Elementary in El Sereno, and the principal at the time was part of the after school program, like a movement that was starting LA's Best.
Okay.
And I mean, again, at this point, I was already a single mom. I already had my son, and I needed a job. So my principal was in charge of several schools in that area. They were like regional supervisors, if you will. And so there was a position that was open at Griffith Elementary School. I went, I applied, I interviewed, I got it, and I was their drill team coach.
Hey. So did you have? Okay, so the real question is: did you have the flags or the shields? Which was your?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was all arms.
All arms. Yeah. All right, I'll take it. All arms. Love it. And how long were you in the after school space?
Oh, I was in after school for maybe like 6 or 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I went from drill team. You know, we ran like homework club. I worked anywhere from like the kinder kids to the 6th grade kids. Eventually I became a coordinator. I went back to the site where I was an instructional aide, and I was their after school coordinator. So I coordinated. Yes, it was great. I coordinated the Beyond the Bell.
Yeah.
So the East U services, and the LA's Best. And, like, I absolutely loved that space.
That's awesome, dude. So now it's confirmed a couple things for me, that you are probably one of my favorite administrators because you have that much cred. I mean, not too many people have that much after school cred, so that's pretty awesome. And
was it the drill team?
It was the drill team. It was that. It was because you didn't have shields or flags. It was arms, straight up. That's it. You got cred that way. And then I definitely want to invite you out to Boost this year. One of the best conferences for after school or expanded learning practitioners. We would love for you to go, and we'll pick up your registration for being a guest on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Oh, I'd love to go. I haven't been yet.
Oh, you have not? It's great. I think you're gonna really enjoy it, especially with the background that you have as again, one of the things that I like telling people, because like you've seen education through all these different lenses, as an instructional aide, as the after school practitioner, as a teacher, as an administrator, as all those different things. make you a pretty informed and a pretty aware administrator. You know what I mean? And so I don't know that too many people will have had that experience. Typically they'll go, like, what's weird is we're starting to see a lot of younger administrators spend like 2 years in the classroom, go get their admin credential, finish the 5 years, and then all of a sudden like they become APs and shit like that. They don't necessarily have all the lived experience or the wisdom that someone like you might have. You know what I'm saying? So there's something to be said about that. So thank you.
So give us your catalog of work in education as a teacher and an administrator. What schools have you taught at? What schools have you been in AP? Obviously, we know you're a principal, but give us the whole catalog.
Okay, well, I started teaching at a charter school. It's not the charter schools the way you would imagine the charter schools. Like, having like a choice school, if you will. I worked at a charter school called Soledad Enrichment Action. It was out of LACO, Los Angeles County Office of Education. Mm-hmm. And what we did was we serviced all of our at-risk kids. So the students that came to SEA were the students that were just getting out of JCCS.
Okay.
So they were kids that had already been expelled from LA Unified. Mm-hmm. And there was really nowhere else for them to go. They'd spent time in jail, or LA Unified kicked them out. They kicked them out of their continuation schools, and this was kind of their last chance. Mm-hmm. So I started so just to explain it, there's 18 different classrooms. It's one school with 18 classrooms all over LA County. Oh. So they were from like North Hills to Pomona and everything in between. So I started working in the Crenshaw area. Mm-hmm. That was my first classroom. And that was back when you were allowed to teach under an emergency credential. Mm-hmm. But they were quickly coming through with the No Child Left Behind. And they were only allowing teachers who had full credentials to teach. So within a couple of years, I lost my classroom because I hadn't cleared my credential. Mm. So I was in the credential program, but I hadn't finished. So then they moved me into special ed because special ed had a year. They gave them a year grace period, so you could still work under an emergency for SPED. I worked in special education for the resource kids within the same school system. So I worked at the South Central site. I still kept my Crenshaw site. I worked at North Hills. It was North Hills, and there was one more school. I can't think of. Anyways, out by North Hills area, Northridge area. Mm-hmm. I did that for a year. And then when I got my full credential, then I went to the Southgate site. I worked at Southgate for a few years. And after a few of my kids passed, it was really rough. And I decided to make the leap into admin. And I was hired as an assistant principal through the Alliance for College Ready Public Schools. Okay. So very different charter. And the exciting part, though, was that I was able to open a school site in Watts. Oh, right on. So we were able to build it pretty much, from the ground up, from the curriculum to hiring the teachers, to looking at our space and creating a learning environment for the students that we were bringing on board. So that was exciting, but still, it was exciting. And I was working with a population that I loved and giving them, just experiences and ensuring that they were going to maintain an A through G pathway. Yeah. But the opportunity to become an assistant principal at a comprehensive high school out in Riverside opened up. So I went from Watts to Menifee, and I worked as an assistant principal for Paloma Valley High School. So that was a little different.
Ew, Riverside. Ew. I can.
No, you should say, when you said Menifee, both Cesar and I looked at each other with big ass eyes open, like Menifee. Yeah, that must have been a change.
A little bit, yeah. It was a little bit of a culture shock.
To say the least.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
My comadre teaches elementary in Menifee, and I remember her commenting that there were discussions in the teacher's lounge about why Cesar Chavez Day was a holiday. And I was just like, whoa, where do you live? So yeah, Menifee, I know it.
Yes.
And how long were you trapped out there?
Residing out there.
So I was at Paloma for about 3 years.
Okay.
And then I transferred within the same school district. I transferred to Paris High School.
Right
so
on.
I was at Paris High School for about 6 years.
Right on.
And were there some differences between Paloma and Paris? I know Paris is a little more grimy, but I don't know Paloma that well.
There were some significant differences. Paris High School had their full student body were students of color. So there were, Latino and African American students.
Yeah.
The kids were absolutely amazing. A lot of poverty in that area. In Menifee, I think when I was there, it was about like 60% white, 40% Latino, more affluent neighborhood.
Yeah.
So a population that I wasn't necessarily accustomed to, coming from the background where I taught and, even moving into an assistant principal position, working in Watts.
That's what I'm curious about, man, because that transition already, given everything else being equal, the transition from teacher to administrator is tough. But given the culture shock, like how much more difficult was that making the transition from being a teacher to an administrator?
That was probably the hardest for me. I think as the teacher and working in the spaces that I worked in, we were able to have like very just frank conversations. We were able to argue and we were able to show our passion with loud voices and animated, with a little more animation.
Yeah.
That wasn't necessarily appreciated when I moved over to Menifee.
I like how you're being super diplomatic on all these responses.
Right.
I'm like super impressed. I think we need to do another version with at least a bottle of wine, a glass of wine or something, man. 'Cause...
My ahijado went to Heritage High School, and to be honest, it seemed like a high school that you would see like on a WB show or something like that. You know what I mean? It didn't seem real to me from my high school experience or my teaching experience at all. So I know Menifee a little bit. I know Paris a little bit too because I have family there. So you dealt with some change. Period.
Yeah. So there was some serious change, and Heritage within that district, Heritage is kind of in the middle, right? It has a little bit of Paloma Valley, a little bit of Paris, so it kind of sits more in the middle. You're gonna have like kids that I mean, I guess that's the best way I could describe it, right? Paloma Valley is usually your more affluent. They have at least at that time, they had the least amount of kids of color. Heritage had a little more, they were a little more Latino, but still had a strong white population. And then Paris, I mean, if you'd see a white kid, it was like a unicorn, right? You're like, who is, like, wow, we do have white kids. Like, there he is, right? Or you'd think they were lost. Like, hey, buddy.
Got it.
You looking for the office?
And so how does the opportunity open up for you to come down south to Escondido?
I had been an assistant principal for almost a decade, and there were some changes in the district, and I figured, this is my time. I think for a long time, you doubt yourself and you think you need to learn more or get more experience in certain areas. And I looked, and Escondido really had the demographics that I was looking for. It had the history that I was used to and working out in Paris. And just looking at the school and reading about it, it just really felt like home. And I knew that was where I wanted to be. So I applied, and I was lucky enough to get it. Now I'm officially the first person of color in 120 some odd years to call myself the principal.
I was just gonna say it. I'm super curious. Like, day one, boss lady walks in, Latina, principal, first time ever. What is that? What are you thinking when you're walking in the first day and you got the keys?
Holy shit.
Yep. Yeah, you ain't lying, huh? Because everything is your responsibility, from the trash to every kid, to every parent, everything's your responsibility, huh?
Yeah, from the Roundup they used to kill the weeds to,
And did you have anybody that was already working here, some kind of support system here in Escondido? Somebody who kind of waved you in?
I came in really not knowing anybody.
Wow.
I didn't have, I can't say I didn't have support. I did. I think my name came up as a candidate because the JDP, our doctoral program through UCSD and Cal State San Marcos, has a strong presence in this area.
Gotcha.
So I think when my dissertation chair knew that I was applying, she reached out to some folks, and so I was given an interview. So I did have support, and I had people that I knew I could talk to. I just didn't know anybody. It wasn't like I already had a friend within the district.
Right.
No, but
I
think it goes to show that your work locally actually like put your name out there on its own, right? You know what I mean? That's a good thing. That's a beautiful thing.
It was a leap of faith, right? Because no one knows me. No one knows me out here. Like, they don't know what I've done. They don't know my history. And like, I have to build that from scratch, because it's not like, oh, I knew her when she was in the classroom and she was badass, or I worked with her within this other space, or we did drill team together. Like, no one knows me.
Well, she coached my drill team, my daughter in drill team, right? She's cool.
Right. Yeah, even at that, it's not like, oh, my son had her as a teacher. Like, people are literally learning me from now, like from here, my present day. They don't, there's no history to say she has been, or what I have done, or things that I've accomplished prior to being in this space.
Sure.
But I think I quickly learned my colleagues, my friend Dr. Casas has been just absolutely a rock star with me and helping me network and meet some fine folks like my friend Rodrigo here.
So, one thing I do want to ask you about is I am totally familiar with the young mother going into education. That was my mom, pregnant at 18. Well, actually having me at 18 and having to take me to college with her. I'm curious that at this point, when you become principal, how far along is your son into his education? Ooh. And how did your experience kind of shape your vision for what he was doing at school?
I think because very similar, right? I had him at 19, got pregnant at 18, had him at 19, but he spent a lot of nights at school with me. Yeah. I've always said that he should have gotten his BA along with me.
Well, I've been there.
Yes. Uh-huh. But I think because I worked so much, and if I wasn't working, I was going to school. I think I put a lot of pressure on him. Mm-hmm. And when we moved out here, when we moved out to Riverside, we kind of settled in Murrieta. Mm-hmm. And you have to remember, my son comes from East LA, where, they're putting their money together to buy a can of soda from the ice cream truck to being in a space where kids have 3 or 4 Gatorades in their backpack. So
it's real.
Yeah, I don't think that he felt like he fit in. I think he dealt with a lot of racism. And I think he ate a lot of it for my sake because he knew that I was living out my dream. Like this was my path. So I think he stayed quiet through a lot of like just real ugly stuff, like teachers saying things to him, campus supervisors telling him like, this is America, you need to speak English. People calling him like a beaner, a cherry picker.
Wow.
So yeah, he had a really rough time in that space. So he rebelled a little bit, refused to be A through G, fought me tooth and nail. His counselor at his particular school didn't help either. Yeah, just kind of like, well, he doesn't want to. And I said, what do you mean he doesn't want to? He doesn't get to decide. And I just think his counselor was also the counselor for the athletes. So like if you weren't going to a D1 school on a full scholarship, they didn't care about you. They just I think they saw a little brown bean walk into their office with gauges in his ears, and they knew he was going to be a piece of shit, and they let him give up on himself.
Damn.
They didn't believe in him and what he can do. And my son needed more than just me to be his cheerleader.
That's
and
real.
Nobody else was cheering for him. Like your mom can say you're amazing and you're super smart until she's blue in the face. But if you hear it from somebody else, it means something.
Yeah.
And I don't think there was anybody there to tell him how amazing he was. So the boy struggled a little bit. He ended up he moved to LA with my parents, went to East LA College, and the boy ended up on the dean's list.
There we go.
So it's not that he wasn't smart. It was, I think he was just defeated in high school, but he's killing it at community college. He's just passing all of his classes. He loves school. He wanted to be a high school counselor. He took sociology and absolutely fell in love with it. So now he wants to be a sociology professor. He's getting ready to graduate, I think at the end of this semester, and then he's transferring hopefully to UCR to finish up his degree.
Dang, man.
That's a tough story. That's a tough story. And really when it comes
I got through it without crying.
I'm proud of you, sis, because that's hard.
Fam, I gotta tell you, I'm looking over at Rodrigo and I rubbed my eye at him because
times.
I was like, damn.
That's it. This is like, so the gems that you learned raising your son, like how that obviously influences how you lead your school. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like how are you communicating that when you're talking to your team, or like I want to know more about like how you communicate that message, because people gotta feel it. I know they feel it. We felt it on the other side of hearing the story, but like how do you communicate that, man?
Like honestly, I think from like the onset, from the moment I walked on to this campus, my message was always about all kids. Like not just the kids that show up every day, not just, the kids that want to do the work, but all kids. The kid that's getting high in the bathroom, the kid that's, just making poor choices. We're about all kids and all kids being successful. And I think it was a little overwhelming for some folks, right? Like it seemed really unrealistic. But I think at the core, the teachers, like they get it. Like they know, yes, like we have to be about all kids, and making sure that the practices that we implement and the rules that we roll out are really equitable, and we're not creating those systematic barriers that keep kids from being successful. And I'm not saying we're perfect, but we're always open to conversation and poking holes and really using different lenses to see how we're impacting our kids.
Does
that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. And it's fucking awesome hearing it from like a school leader who's actually lived through it and that is like sharing it. You know what I mean? And the manner in which we share things is important. I'm super like two real kind of interesting questions, I guess, in terms of like what's been the biggest learning between stepping foot on Escondido's campus to like joining Carpe, and then like from Carpe to now, like those are there two different learnings, or is there one learning? Like I'm curious if there was any difference in joining the network. But I'm also, I know for a fact that there was tons of stuff that you gleaned from just being the principal for the first time at Escondido. So I want to honor that too.
I think some of the biggest learning from being a part of the network was just really understanding and just understanding that sometimes my team needs to hear it from a different space, right? So it doesn't have to come from me, and I don't have to, ¿cómo te diré? I think it was a lot of the things that I was asking to happen. It was just that I was asking to happen and giving examples of what I would like to see. But being a part of the network really gave them a space to make it their own ideas, make it their own journey, versus we're doing something that the principal wants us to do. And that was huge. That was a big, like, you need to get out of your damn head. You need to step back and let your people do what they want to do the way they need to get it done, so that they could own it and they can love it and they can live it every day.
How did you know that? How did you know that was the huge piece? Like, was there a singular point that you remember where you're like, that's the one? Or has it just been an accumulation of like little wins here and there?
I think I saw it like after I think I saw it when we were in the interview process to be a part of Carpe, because right. Honestly, because, the things that we were being asked and some of the data that we had to collect kind of made people a little more curious about what we're doing. And then the interview process allowed people the space to kind of share their about themselves and what their passion is, and how they support kids. And it became something that we knew we wanted to be a part of. And it really happened, like it really gained that momentum after our first convening. Like after the first time we met together and we had that team space and we were planning things out, I think it just got exciting, right? And they were able to own a lot of the movement moving forward. So then my role then just became supporter. Like, yes, what do you need to get it done? Absolutely. It's no longer pushing like, do this and we should do this. And how about we do this? Now it's them saying, oh, can we do this? Can we do that? Can we have a space to make this happen? And then I just get to be like, yes.
Yep.
Done. Let's do it. Yeah. Right?
Remove barriers and remove obstacles and let them do their thing, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you need to make this happen? What's the big picture? Like what, like where, how do you want to live this out? What's in your way? And let me remove that for you.
I love it. Fucking love it.
And it's just been it's been amazing, the work that they've done. And this is a team of counselors that have worked together for a decade.
Wow.
And the work that they've really been able to do collectively is, I mean, well, you see our numbers. It's amazing.
Yeah. I'm not going to be able to over here touting all the numbers, but you guys are definitely leading the pack.
Well, we're 72 kids away from hitting our goal.
Woo! And I bet you there's a 72 kids that probably have already been submitted something via like the mail, so it's going to show up in like the next 4 weeks. But
yes.
You know, I appreciate you bringing up the interview process, and thank you for that, because I do remember that interview process pretty vividly. In the sense, do you remember the question that was like kind of everybody kind of? I asked the question. And I don't know if everybody was totally ready for that question. And it was the second time I asked it, knowing that I was walking into that, because you guys had, I don't know, 1 or 2 incidents with just, you know, outright racism on campus, right, with the student body or something. And so the way that they handled the question was fucking awesome. But the question I asked was like, this community has a history of institutional racism. Like, how do you guys plan on addressing that? And I don't know that anybody was
ready for that
question, but you guys all like we were taking steps, like we're addressing it. We knew this was an issue, and this kind of just sped up the process. And it was super refreshing to hear just Adriana really kind of take it on head on. Like, I don't remember you really kind of backing off. I don't know. Could you speak to a little bit to like how leaders can get out of the way of their teams a little bit more? Or what do you think that mechanism is, though, Adriana? Like, what is it? Fear that keeps people so on top of their team, or what is it that? Because that's also a big piece of like just kind of stepping out of the way and letting the people do their thing, right?
I think so. And like I said, and like I mentioned before, I'd already had conversations with like my admin team with respect to some of the things that I would like to see happen, so that we could remove those barriers that keep our students from filing for financial aid. So I think when we came into the Carpe space and the team time, I may have like given suggestions like, hey, what if we did something like this? Like, you know, again, using our PSAT day, right? Where all of our 10th and 11th grade students are taking the PSAT, instead of letting the seniors stay home and sleep. Like, why don't we bring them in and really kick off our FAFSA application, right? And it took, you know, they had some questions like, what might that look like? And I answered what I thought, but then just kind of stepped back. And then they started getting excited, like, oh, and we could do this. And be like, yeah, you could do that. You know, and like, well, what do we do with our freshmen? And then it's like, well, what conversations might we want to have with freshmen to prepare them or to let them understand what the 4-year, you know, like what their 4-year plan is. Like, might that be a space where we can do that? And then you kind of just drop some ideas and then step back and let them get really excited with knowing that they're going to have like a certain number of hours with the students. And it's all about college. Like, that's a counselor's jam. So just really giving, you know, I think, at least for me, I think my team already had a lot of great ideas that were living in silos. Right? Like this counselor has a great idea of what they would want to do. And this counselor had a great idea of what they wanted to do, but we never really created a space where they could make those things come to fruition when they're all working toward one goal.
Right. That's crazy, right? And that it feels like the work that we've been doing helps de-silo a lot of what's happening on campuses, and then it ends up being like college access is the initial conversation, right? Like FAFSA completions or whatever, or SAT signups or whatever that conversation is. But it what we've noticed is it starts to surface some of these other institutional issues that you guys can totally address if you guys stopped working in silos, right? Like that's huge. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest learnings that we've had as a team. Like, these practices and these segmentations of things that we do are really kind of agnostic. They're not solely for college access. They're also for special ed students or athletes or whatever. Like you could use them in a multitude of ways. Cesar, you had a question around.
I'm wondering, like, how do you build that trust with teachers to have these discussions to make some of these changes that you want? I know most of the work focuses around counselors, but obviously, Adriana has to build trust within her teachers too to work and not in the silos. So how do you build that trust?
We used other teachers, and it became more of a grassroots movement.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Ask teachers, and teachers will do it. Oh, fuck.
Yeah. So we started with Avid, obviously, because just the experience that Avid has with, the whole, financial aid and college, and that's their world, and they went out and talked to other teachers that would be interested in supporting. And we said, okay. And we just started kind of building our teachers based on who wanted to learn more, who wanted to be a part of that process. And, we sent teachers to trainings. When we do our big kickoff to college day, we have a team of teachers that do the financial aid packets with the kids. Mm-hmm. And that's the regular classroom teachers who just really wanted to be a part of that work and wanted to learn more for the next year. So we got them trained up so they can answer questions and feel more comfortable in that space. And we're just kind of building capacity.
And I think that's something that more principals need to understand and more instructional leaders need to understand, is that teachers kind of already have their own networks. And it's like, oh, it's going to be so tough to push out this new, let's implement restorative justice. Oh, it's going to be so tough because we're going to get pushback. No, there's actually a cadre of teachers on campus that want to grow that, right?
Already want to do that.
Yeah, so you have to trust that there's already a network for that on campus, as opposed to stepping on and saying, hey, I know this person does good work, let me bring them in my network. I mean, again, it's that building that trust and knowing that those people are already there.
And that's kind of how you build those leaders, right? You build those leaders within that space.
I'm curious, that's kind of a good segue into the next component of what I wanted to talk about, because I do want to respect your time, and I want to kind of.
Are we already at an hour? Or
we're a little bit. We're close to it. But I
wanted to ask about. Does she have an assets program over there? Does she have an after school program?
Yeah, at some point we'll talk about her after school program. Like we will, because that's going to be on the boost thing. But like we just talked about trust, and part of what an extension of the Carpe work is this Carpe Alex stuff, right? And Alex is the Advanced Learning and Experiences program, right? And so. We invited Adriana to come out to Cincinnati Children's Hospital and Strive Partnerships in Cincinnati to see kind of both collective impact in action, and then also continuous improvement in action through Cincinnati Children's Hospital. So she was super, super integral in being a part of like what that learning was like. But something that came out of that experience was like, who do we want to be in part of Alex? And if you're going to be a partner of Alex or a participant of Alex, like, what should you, in the spirit of Netflix, right? What are the culture, norms that you should embody? What should you walk into with? And I think Adriana does all of them when we send out the culture deck, and we'll share the culture deck online with everybody. But the things that like we expect in, or the things that we look for in our Carpe Alex team members is like, one, this idea of trust, right? Like, how do you approach trust? The next piece was like, find and create value, curate the space in the container, develop self and system awareness, practice love and compassion, and then be intentional with your thoughts and your actions, right? And so Adriana does all of those, right, on a daily basis. I'm curious, Adriana, like, after hearing that list and looking through the slide deck, like, what pieces do you feel like really speak to you about that stuff? Or what pieces do you feel are things that every administrator should know, or every school leader should be aware of?
It's a big question, my friend. I mean, shit.
Well, I just know, like, and you could just answer it however you want to answer it. Just don't even worry about the slide deck. Like, what is it that you feel like every school leader should walk out with, man? Because, again, I look to you and I see this leader, and this quiet leader, because it's crazy how, like, you're just kind of under the radar, but you're steadily moving people, doing things, right? And you, like, I'm just super fascinated on how you were able to change the culture of, or at least influence the culture of a school. So I just want to kind of surface some of that stuff, because I know that there's listeners who are just like, I want to work for her, or I want to do the same thing that she's doing. That's fucking badass. Help us understand what that looks like.
Yikes. Holy smokes. I think just creating a space where people feel comfortable trying something different. People feel comfortable stepping out of the norm and kind of taking that leap of faith, or like, let's just try something different, because what we've been doing isn't giving us the results that we want. So let's just step out. Let's try something different, and let's fail forward. And just be able to create that space where it's okay for it to not be amazing the first time around. And know we're learning together, right? Like, this is new for all of us. We're all going to learn together, but we're all going to get better together. I think really just building that safe space and building that trust that everybody's going to do their part and everybody's going to pull their weight, and we're all going to give it everything that we have. And then we're going to come back and we're going to see what we've learned and just do better. Does that make sense?
Fuck yeah. No, see
what?
This is what I love. I love having these kind of conversations, because these are the conversations that people need to hear, man. Like, people need to hear how we care about people, how we lead people in these distressing times, right? Like, how we're creating space for people to take challenges, to take risks, because it's not, you're in a safe place to do that. You know what I mean? That's important. Adriana, we're getting close to time here, but I'm super curious. Like, do you have any ask for any of the listeners? Like, if there's one thing you can ask every single listener to do, what would that be? Or what do you have? Obviously, go check out the website, your website, or your
you got a website,
your Twitter handle, or whatever. Follow her on them Twitters. But what's the ask, amiga? What would you like for all of our listeners to do on your behalf?
I would ask just to give a little bit of grace, right? We're all doing the best we can every day, and we make mistakes. We're human, and just give us a little bit of grace. That's it.
Why am I getting emotional? Piece of shit. You did it to us. Okay. I didn't think I was going to get emotional. I got emotional twice in this fucking interview. Thank you. I
got to go vote, my friend. So we got to wrap it up.
I know. I got to get out of here too. So, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Hopefully the next time we have this conversation, it'll be with a drink in hand. Adriana, I don't know. I mean, Cesar, is there anything else you got? Yeah, like
No, Adriana, I just really appreciate your time, and I hope to meet you in person. You are an amazing educator, but more importantly, I wish your son good luck on his journey through education, because I was your son at one time, and so you really hit me with that, and I wish him the best.
Thank you. Thank
all right,
you.
sis.
I appreciate that.
We love you. We love you. Love you. We love you. We love you. Thank you so much. We'll be in contact. And folks, that's a wrap.
All right. Peace.
Educated Guest Podcast episode, whatever.
Awesome. For people who want to know more about Carpe and what you're doing, where should they go?
Yeah, so you can head up the Carpe website. It's hthgsc.edu/college. And we'll put the link in the show notes so that you can check it out.
And for where do people find Educated Guests?
You can find the Educated Guest Podcast at educatedguestpodcast.com or anywhere, any platform where you're listening to A1 Top Shelf Podcast. So you're talking Apple, Google, Stitcher, TuneIn, all that.
Got it. For people who want to get a feel for the show, what are some good episodes to start with?
Well, we got 5 seasons, so I'll just run off a few from the most recent season. And Don Dumas, former County Teacher of the Year, coach at Bonita Vista High School. That's an amazing episode. We interviewed Stephanie Brown, who is the new principal of Lincoln High School in San Diego. That was an awesome episode. And then you got to check out a cat over at City College, a math professor, Dr. Rob Rubalcaba, a.k.a. Professor Shadow, and the way that he integrates hip-hop into his math courses at City College. The dude's inspiring. And so if you give those 3 episodes a listen, you'll get a good idea of what we're about.
Yeah, conversation with Chris Emden was dope. There's a lengthier conversation, but I think it's worth it. Oscar de la Torre, he's a board member of Santa Monica Malibu Joint Union. That story is freaking awesome too.
Is that the one where Malibu tried to secede?
Yeah. We were they were right in the middle of Malibu's trying to take themselves out of the district, and so. But his story is awesome too. Like, community member started his own nonprofit as a recording studio, and then was asked by the community to become a board member, and then became a board member, and then has been there and has continued to be there. Jerry Udor, he's a teacher over in Otay Ranch High School, AP history teacher. Freaking a gem of a human being, man. that was one of the interviews that got me emotional. Really got me in touch with my humanity, dude. He's a great guy.
High Tech High Unboxed is written and edited by me, Alec Patton, except for guest episodes like this one. So today we say a big thank you to the team at Educated Guests, Cesar Fernandez, Rodrigo Arancibia, and Ed Nunez. Their interview with Dr. Adriana Lepe-Ramirez also appears in the latest issue of Unboxed, which you can find on our website at hthunboxed.org. That's hthunboxed.org. And you can order a real hard copy version there too. The whole issue is about continuous improvement, and it is just packed with goodness. Check the show notes for that Unboxed link, plus links to Carpe's website and to those other episodes of Educated Guests that Cesar and Rodrigo just recommended. Our theme music is Agassi Into the Spider's Web by Brother Herschel. Thanks for listening.